Okay, so for number 36, this isn't actually an exact value. I used a worksheet generator to come up with this problem, and after looking at the problem and already giving it to you guys, I realized that this problem is not an exact value, so you would not be able to do this without a calculator. It looks like it's an exact value because it says negative root 2, and we know that could work with cosecant or secant, but it will not work with cotangent. I just want to show you the inverse for cotangent though. The cotangent curve goes from 0 to pi. And so and then it also cycles. So we know that it repeats inside those or around those asymptotes. So every pi, between pi and 2 pi, there's another cycle, etc. And so I'm looking for the cotangent value that would be equal to negative 1.41. And that's going to be somewhere between pi over 2 and pi. Okay, somewhere, over here or something. But we don't know the exact value between pi over 2 and pi that this is going to work for. The answer key on this worksheet says 3 pi over 4, and that is not correct. If I wanted it to be 3 pi over 4, okay, if I was going to match the answer key. So really this one you can't do without a calculator. Okay, but if I wanted it to be something to the negative 1 of negative root 2 is equal to 3 pi over 4. If I look at the trig graph, I think where is inverse defined at 3 pi over 4? So the sine curve goes from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. And so negative root 2, I know I'd be looking at the cosecant or the secant to get this negative root 2 number. So the cosecant curve or the secant curve would look for sine, would look like this. So the sine curve in yellow with the restriction, sorry, not in yellow, the sine curve is drawn in pink, the restrictions in the rectangle. I then graphed real quickly in rough sketch of cosecant in blue. But 3 pi over 4 isn't in that space. So if I was trying to figure out what they actually meant to ask instead of cosecant, what they actually meant to ask was the secant curve. The secant curve is based on the cosine curve. So if I draw the restricted area of the cosine curve, cosine goes from 0 to pi. As far as my restricted cosine curve. Then the secant function has an asymptote at pi over 2. And so then if I'm looking at 3 pi over 4, okay, where would 3 pi over 4 be? 3 pi over 4 is going to be right there. So really they could have asked for the secant inverse of negative root 2 to get the 3 pi over 4. But with what they did ask, the cotangent just can't be done without a calculator. So sorry that problem's a little bit of a mess. You can disregard the stuff to the right. Just another way of looking at the similar problem that's different.